She doesn't belong here. Get out, you witch. He heard those words at 6:47 in the evening, standing in front of the glass doors of the Central Auditorium at the University of Guadalajara. I was wearing a pearl-colored dress I had sewn with my own hands, and inside my purse was a small box holding my mother's gold chain, Theo and I planned to place around my grandson Diego's neck. Valeria, my daughter-in-law, did not yell. That was the worst part. She said it calmly, elegantly, with both hands held out in front of my chest, as if I were a disease that might slip inside and contaminate the ceremony. There were 190 people around us. Families with flowers, balloons, cameras, women in heels, men in ties. Everyone turned. A young woman pulled her mother away so she would stop staring. One man lowered his eyes. I searched the crowd for Rodrigo, my son. He was not there, or maybe he was there and simply chose not to move. I never knew which hurt more. Valeria, I said, I came to watch Diego graduate. Diego has important guests today, Patricia. We don't need any neighborhood drama. The dress suddenly felt tight around my chest. He had spent 3 weeks sewing it, stitch by stitch, as if every button whispered, I still exist. I was 71 years old, and I had spent more than 40 years sewing clothes for other people so they could shine. Quinceañera dresses, school uniforms, wedding suits, party tablecloths. My hands carried tiny scars from needles and scissors, but those same hands had bought the apartment where Valeria now lived like a queen. Rodrigo was my only son. When my husband, Fernando, died of a heart attack, Rodrigo was 16. I reopened my swing room the day after the funeral, because rent, school, and food do not wait for a widow to finish crying. I sold Fernando's car to pay for Rodrigo's university. I sewed through fevers, through a bandaged wrist, through eyes burned red by the lamp over my machine. On the day Rodrigo graduated, he waveto me from the stage, only to me. And I believed every sacrifice had been worth it. Then Valeria came into our lives. Beautiful, organized, and cold. At her wedding, she seated me at the back of the hall. During the toast, she thanked her parents, her friends, and her sisters. My name never came. I folded a white napkin 4 times so I would not cry. When Diego was born, I embroidered a blanket for him for 5 months. Valeria looked at it and left it on a chair. But Diego loved me from the time he was little. He ran into my arms, called me Grandma Patri, and begged me for stories about the Libertad market and his great-grandfather who sold fabric. That was the one thing Valeria could never control. Until she started trying. First it was schedules. Then shorter visits, then gentle little sentences. Rodrigo, your mother gets tired. Maybe Shesholm come over so much. I stayed quiet for 16 years because I was afraid of losing my son. I stayed quiet when Valeria asked me to transfer the apartment, for the good of the family. I stayed quiet when Rodrigo looked down while she placed documents on the table. I stayed quiet when they offered me 950,000 pesos for an apartment I knew was worth far more. But 3 weeks before the graduation, I went to see Attorney Mendoza, the notary who had signed my original deed. He showed me the valuation, 3,200,000 pesos. Valeria worked in real estate. She knew. She had tried to take the only asset I had built in my entire life for less than 1/3 of its value. That day, I wrote a message and saved it as a draft. Now, standing outside the auditorium with Valeria blocking the doors, I sent it. Then I turned around and walked toward the parking lot without running. I sat under an ash tree, gripping the little jewelry box in my hand. I did not cry. I had already cried too many years in silence. 20 minutes later, I heard footsteps rushing toward me. Grandma Patri. I looked up. Diego stood there in his graduation gown, his cap in his hand, his eyes red. I saw what my mother did, he said, breathing hard. She should never have treated you that way, never. I opened my arms. My 22-year-old grandson pressed his face into my shoulder the way he had when he was 5. Will you walk in with me? He asked. I stood up. Yes, sweetheart. But first I want your mother to see me come back. I walked back with Diego holding my arm. Valeria was still near the doors, talking to a woman in a pink hat. When she saw us, her mouth froze in the middle of a sentence. Her eyes dropped to Diego's hand on my arm, then lifted to my face. For the first time in 16 years, her fingers trembled. Diego, go inside, she said. Your place is in there. My place is with my grandmother, too. Valeria swallowed. Do not make a scene. I stepped forward. I did not come here to fight. I came to watch my grandson graduate. And I am not leaving. Patricia, this is not the place. You're right. That is why on Monday at 10 o'clock, we will talk in Attorney Mendoza's office. Her face changed. The notary's name hit her harder than any scream could have. She knew exactly what it meant. I entered the auditorium. Diego saved me a seat in the front row. When they called his name, he lifted his diploma toward me. I cried quietly, my mother's gold chain pressed into my palm. Rodrigo sat 3 rows behind me, stiff, staring straight ahead. He did not turn around. That night, I decided that it no longer mattered. On Monday, I arrived at the notary's office with my blue notebook. Valeria arrived alone at 10:07, carrying her usual folder. Attorney Mendoza explained everything. The apartment had been in my name since 1998. Every payment was current. No transfer had been signed. There was no debt against it. Then he placed the valuation on the table. The property is worth 3,200,000 pesos. The offer of 950,000 is less than 30%. Valeria smiled with dry lips. It was a family price. I never meant to harm her. There is no transaction to correct, the notary said. Dona Patricia did not sign anything. She looked at me with rage held tightly behind her eyes. Why are you doing this? To destroy the family? No. To take back what was always mine. Rodrigo will be in a very difficult position. Rodrigo is an adult. I raised him to make adult decisions. Valeria closed her folder. I never thought you were capable of this. I did not answer. I could have told her that the strongest fabric often feels soft at first. Instead, I watched her leave. When the door closed, I signed the first document for the trust. The apartment would not go to Rodrigo. It would not go to Valeria. It would not be sold. It would be protected in Diego's name until he turned 25, where no one else could touch it. That afternoon, Rodrigo came to see me in the small room I had been renting ever since I could no longer fit in my own apartment. Mom, can we talk? I let him in. He sat across from me with his hands clasped together, just like when he was young. Valeria told me that if I did not get you to sign, she would turn Diego against me. She said she would make things up about you and about me. I was scared. And because you were scared, you gave away my place? He lowered his head. I did not know what to do. Yes, you did. You chose not to defend me because it was easier than facing her. Rodrigo cried in silence. I wanted to hug him. But a mother's love cannot keep mending cloth that her son tears every time he is afraid. I love you, Rodrigo. But I need time. And I need you to understand something. Loving you does not mean letting myself be erased. That night, Diego called me. Grandma, if my mother gets angry, let her be angry. I know who was there for me. I looked at my tired hands and smiled without guilt for the first time. The following months were strange, not because of the noise, but because of the silence. The silence of not answering Valeria's calls. The silence of not chasing Rodrigo to soothe his guilt. The silence of waking up and remembering that the apartment was still mine, that my signature mattered, and that my life was not an old garment. Waiting for someone else to throw it away. The trust moved forward every Tuesday with Attorney Mendoza's patient guidance. Diego came with me to the appointments. He did not say much, but he listened. That was new to me, someone from my own blood listening without correcting me, without rushing me, without making me feel that my pain was an exaggeration. One day, he took me to eat birria at a simple little place near Zapopan. Grandma, why did you put up with it for so long? I watched the steam rising from my bowl. Because I thought that if I set boundaries, I would lose your father. Did you lose him? It took me a moment to swear. I think I lost him little by little every time he lowered his eyes. Diego took my hand. You did not lose me. That was the first twist Valeria had not calculated. She thought she could use Diego as a weapon against Rodrigo, but Diego was no longer a child. He had seen too much. After the graduation, he spoke to both of his parents and told them he would not be anyone's messenger, weapon, or prize. Valeria went to stay with her sister for what she called a temporary separation. Rodrigo started therapy. I did not celebrate anyone's broken marriage. But I also did not go running to pick up the pieces. The second twist came 3 months later, when Valeria requested a family meeting with Attorney Mendoza. She arrived with Rodrigo, wearing the face of a victim and carrying a new folder. We want to review the trust, she said. Diego is young, Patricia may have influenced him. The notary placed the meeting recordings, the valuations, the signed documents, and an email from Valeria's real estate company on the table. In that email, she had asked for the real value off the apartment 2 months before offering me 950,000 pesos. Rodrigo read the page and went pale. You knew it was worth 3,200,000? Valeria did not answer. You offered my mother that amount knowing it was less than 30%? It was an asset strategy, she muttered. Diego stood up slowly. No. It was stealing from me grandmother. That day, Valeria lost the thing she wanted most, control of the story. Rodrigo stopped defending her. Diego stopped justifying her. And I stopped fearing her. I am not going to you, I told her, because I do not want to spend my final years in court. But if you ever come near my property or my name again, then you will meet the seamstress who learned how to cut without trembling. Valeria left without saying goodbye. This time, it was not only her hands that trembled. Her whole mask did. In time, I opened me singer sewing machines again. I uncovered them the way someone wakes old friends. The smell of oil, fabric, and dust returned a part of me I thought had been buried beneath years of fear. An old client asked me to make a wedding dress for her daughter. I accepted. The first measurement I wrote in my blue notebook was not waist or shoulders. It was a sentence: what a woman builds alone, she defends alone. The day we signed the final trust papers, Diego and I sat in front of the glass desk. He signed first, with an engineer's handwriting, clear more than beautiful. Then he handed me the pen. Grandma, are you sure? More sure than I have ever been. I signed beneath his name. I did not feel as if I was giving the apartment away. I felt as if he was saving it. Not to reward anyone, but to protect the memory of everything I had sown, of Fernando, of Rodrigo as a little boy, of Diego running into me arms, of my mother and her gold chain. When we stepped outside, Diego leaned down a little. Now, Grandma. I took the little box from my purse. I opened it and placed the gold chain around his neck right there on the sidewalk of Juarez Street, with buses passing, vendors shouting, and the Guadalajara sun falling over us. This belonged to my mother, I told him. Its value is not the gold. Its value is that it reached you without being sold, hidden, or discounted. Diego cried. So did I. Rodrigo came looking for me weeks later. He did not ask for the apartment. He did not ask me to speak to Valeria. He only asked for forgiveness. It was not perfect. No apology ever is. But for the first time, he did not lower his eyes. Mom, I was a coward. Yes. I do not know if you can forgive me. I do not know yet. But I will no longer forgive you at the cost of myself. That was all. Enough for now. Today, I live in a small apartment near my new sewing room. It is not large, but it has light. Every morning, I buy a vanilla conchus, open the window. And so when I want to, not when hunger bites. Diego comes on Sundays without asking anyone's permission. Sometimes Rodrigo comes too. The three of us sit at the table. There are silences, yes, but now they are honest silences, not silences made of fear. I heard very little about Valeria after that. She lost her position at the real estate company after an internal investigation reviewed her dealings. They say she moved to another city. I do not wish her harm. I only wish her far away. At 71, I learned that a mother can love without handing herself over in pieces. Respect is not something you beg for in a hallway in front of 190 people. A grandmother can walk back through glass doors with her head held high. And sometimes the most important seam is not the one that joins one piece of fabric to another, but the one that stitches a woman back to herself.